It's probably the stupidest thing the human race does, is to look for patterns in this way and say, when a baby falls out of a high-rise building and bounces on the grass below, that must be God. And when millions of children die every day for the lack of pure drinking water and just die of diarrhea in a banal manner, that's because God moves in a mysterious way or isn't involved at all. The study of the so-called Ten Commandments allows us to return a pretty confident reply. The whole story is one of muddle, chaos, inconsistency, revision as one goes along, temper tantrums, lapses into rage, insanity, sadism, vengeance, and general losing of the thread. This would argue either for a very muddled, irrational, forgetful, inconsistent God, or for no God at all. But if we make the assumption that this mass of unresolved contradictions was the outcome of the ignorant struggles of a semi-literate, frightened species of primates, then the mystery clears up all by itself. If you presume that there is a just God, then really what is there to tremble about? Think of the thing that's worrying you most this evening. Think of the thing that's upset you most this week, or that you're most afraid of. For yourself or your loved ones, or your children, your relatives. It would dissolve into a tiny concern if you knew there was a just God. Everything would assume a completely different proportion. At once, there's a just God, what matters it, my trivial worries? But if there isn't a just God, if there isn't a permanent supervision that's all for your own good, and if you don't think that's a sinister idea, as I do, then it will follow that you may have to get rid of slavery on your own account. You may have to take the responsibility upon yourself as a human. You may have to invoke humanism and human solidarity and say, this cannot stand. I cannot live as a human while another person is in bondage. And I submit, just to begin with, just so you understand our difference properly, that that is a much more noble and ethical and also much more logically probable position than the idea that one can refer these dilemmas upward to a supernatural dictatorship, to a celestial totalitarianism that may or may not be just, but we had better hope, since we believe in its existence, does care about us. In other words, that reduces us to the abject and much more to the random and the unconsidered than any scientific concept would do.
Ask yourself if you really wish it was true that there was a celestial dictatorship that watched over you from the moment you were born, actually the moment you were conceived, all through life, night and day, knew your thoughts, waking and sleeping, could in fact convict you of thought crime. The absolute definition of a dictatorship can convict you for what you think, and what you privately want, what you're talking about to yourself, that monitors you like this, under permanent surveillance, control, and supervision, and doesn't even let go of you when you're dead, because that's when the real fun begins. Now, my question is this. Who wishes that that were true? Who wants to lead the life of a serf in a celestial North Korea? I've been to North Korea. I'm one of the very few writers who has. I'm indeed the only writer who's been to all three axis of evil countries, Iran, Iraq, and North Korea. And I can tell you, North Korea, it's the most religious state I've ever been to. I used to wonder when I was a kid, what would it be like praising God and thanking him all day and all night? Well, now I know. Because North Korea is a completely worshipful state. It's set up only to do that, for adoration. And it's only one short of a trinity. They have a father and a son, as you know, the dear leader and the great leader. The father is still the president of the country. He's been dead for 15 years. But the Kim Jong-il, the little one, is only the head of the party and the army. His father is still the president, head of the state. So you have in North Korea what you might call a necrocracy. Or what I call a mausolocracy, a thanatocracy. Just one short of a trinity. Father, son, maybe no Holy Ghost, but they do say that when the birth of the younger one took place, the birds of Korea sang in Korean to mark the occasion. This I've checked. It did not happen. Take my word for it. Didn't occur. And I suppose I should add that they don't threaten to follow you after you're dead. You can leave North Korea. You can get out of their hell and their paradise by dying. Out of the Christian and Muslim one, you cannot. This is the wish to be a slave. And in my view, it poisons human relations. But you'd have to imagine, let's say the human species has been, Homo sapiens has been with us. Some people say as long as 250,000 years. Some say 200, some say 100,000. Francis Collins and Richard Dawkins oscillate about this. It's not a very big argument. I'll just take 100,000, if you like. You have to imagine that human beings are born. Well, actually, most of them, a good number of them aren't born. They die in childbirth or don't long outlive it. They're born into a terrifying world of the unknown. Everything is a mystery to them, everything from disease to volcanic eruptions. Everything is, their life expectancy for the first, I don't know, many tens of thousands of years would be lucky to be in the 20s, probably dying agonizingly over their teeth, poorly evolved as the teeth are, and from other inheritances from being primates, such as the appendix that we don't need, such as the fact that our genitalia appear to have been designed by a committee, other shortcomings of the species, exaggerated by scarcity, by war, by famine, by competition, and so on. And for 98,000 years or so, heaven watches this with complete indifference. And then, we know where your children go to school, by the way. Heaven watches this with total indifference, and then, with 2,000 years to go on the clock, thinks, actually, it's time we intervened. We can't go on like this. Why don't we have someone tortured to death in Bronze Age Palestine? That should teach them. That should give them the chance of redemption. You're free to believe that, but I think the designer who thought of doing it that way was a very cruel, capricious, random, bungling and incompetent one.
Because I don't think it's healthy for people to want there to be a permanent, unalterable, irremovable authority over them. I don't like the idea of a father who never goes away. And nor do you, if you think about it. When you get closer to parenthood, you won't say to your children, don't worry, I'll never die. You won't be at my funeral, I'll be at yours. I'll be at your grandchildren's funeral. You'll never hear the end of me. That's actually not loving paternity. The idea of a king who cannot be deposed, very un-American idea as well as a very undemocratic one. The idea of a judge who doesn't allow a lawyer or a jury or an appeal. This is an appeal to absolutism. It's the part of ourselves that's not so nice, that wants security, that wants certainty, that wants to be taken care of. For hundreds and hundreds of years, the human struggle for freedom was against the worst kind of dictatorship of all, the theocracy, the one that claims it has God on its side, the divine right of kings, the feudal system, the monarchical one against which the American Revolution, with its secular humanism, took place. I believe the totalitarian temptation has to be resisted, and I believe this is one of its core and origin points. And so what I'm inviting you to do is to consider emancipating yourself from the idea that you, selfishly, are the sole object of all the wonders of the cosmos and of nature, because that's not a humble idea at all. It's a very arrogant one, and there's no evidence for it. You do better to emancipate yourself from it and do some real study of genetics and biology and cosmology. And then, again, a second emancipation, to think of yourselves as free citizens who are not in thrall to any supernatural, eternal authority, which you will always find is interpreted for you by other mammals who claim to have access to this authority that gives them special power over you. Don't allow yourselves to have your lives run like that.
To the contrary, men and women made many gods in their own images, and it shows. After all, it's just as difficult for me to disprove that there are 1,000 gods as that there is one. And every believer you know has gods he doesn't believe in. The rabbi doesn't believe in Allah. You don't believe in Zeus. Muslims don't believe that Jesus of Nazareth was the Son of God.
All of them think all that's absolute nonsense, but that their own belief is the valid one. Now again, I put it to you, either all these beliefs are equally true, which seems impossible, or only one of them is true, which admittedly is a possibility, or they are all false, and I am not the atheist you think I am. Everyone in the room is an atheist because they have a God in which they don't believe. Rabbi Wolk has a God in which he doesn't believe. I just say, I'll go you one better. I don't think there are any gods at all.
And I'd urge you to look at those of you who tell you, those people who tell you at your age that you're dead till you believe as they do. What a terrible thing to be telling to children. And that you can only live. And that you can only live by accepting an absolute authority. Don't think of that as a gift. Think of it as a poisoned chalice. Push it aside, however tempting it is. Take the risk of thinking for yourself. Much more happiness, truth, beauty, and wisdom will come to you that way. Thank you.